I hadn't seen Julian in over 8 years. Not since we'd gone our separate ways, back when life felt like it was still full of possibility and recklessness. And now, here he was, back in town for his sister's wedding, standing in front of me like time hadn't done a thing. It was surreal. My chest tightened in that familiar, stupid way it used to when we were together, and I immediately reminded myself to breathe. I was in my late 30s now, married for a decade to someone who seemed more like a roommate than a husband most days. The sex, the attention, the spark. I might as well have been living alone. And yet, seeing Julian again, it all came rushing back, like a flood I wasn't prepared for. He looked different. Older, yes, but in a way that made him more intense somehow. His hair was shorter, a little grayer at the temples, but those eyes, those piercing green eyes, were exactly the same. They always had a way of seeing right through me, and I hated that I felt caught under their gaze again. He smiled that crooked, easy smile that had once made my heart race, and I felt something stir inside me that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. We ended up next to each other at the reception, a coincidence that felt anything but. I tried to make small talk, telling myself to keep it casual, but the tension between us was like static in the air. Every glance, every laugh, every brush of our hands over a champagne glass sent shivers down my spine. I could feel the old pull, the unspoken memory of what we had before. I reminded myself over and over, I was married, I was committed. And yet, I couldn't stop noticing the way he looked at me, as if he were trying to remember every line of my face, every curve of my body, just like I was trying to remember him. By the end of the evening, we found ourselves walking alone in the garden, the music and laughter of the wedding fading behind us. It was quiet, intimate in a way that shouldn't have happened. Julian laughed softly, a little awkward, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, familiar, nostalgic, intoxicating. And for a moment, I imagined what it would be like if all those years hadn't passed, if we hadn't made the choices we did. Just for a second, I let myself remember. But then reality hit. I was married. He was back in town for his sister, not for me. And yet, the way he smiled when he said my name made it clear he remembered me too. I forced a laugh, hoping it would keep my pulse from betraying me. "It's really good to see you," I said, careful, neutral. But my heart was lying, pounding in a way that made me feel guilty for even noticing. Julian just nodded, that same intensity in his gaze, like he was weighing every word I said. That night, when I got home, I couldn't shake the feeling. The spark was still there, the attraction, the history. And I knew that in the coming days, being around him again would be like walking on the edge of a cliff, dangerously thrilling and terrifying all at once. The next morning, I tried to act normal, like nothing had happened the night before. But life has a way of reminding you exactly what you're trying to ignore. I ran into Julian again at the coffee shop near my house, the one I went to because my husband never wanted to leave the house on weekends. He was leaning casually against the counter, sipping an espresso, and that same crooked smile was waiting for me. My stomach did that stupid, familiar flip. "Hey," he said, and it wasn't just a greeting. There was a weight to it, a warmth that made it hard not to lean a little closer. "You're up early." "Yeah, had things to do," I muttered, avoiding his eyes, but I failed. I could feel him watching me, and it wasn't casual. It never was with Julian. He asked about my life, my work, the mundane details I usually recited without thought, and yet every question felt loaded, like he was trying to map the parts of me that still belonged to him. We ended up sitting at the same table, 2 coffees between us, talking about everything and nothing. I told myself it was harmless, just catching up. But the way he laughed at my jokes, leaning slightly closer than necessary, brushing his fingers against mine when handing me a napkin, set off alarms in my brain that I tried to ignore. My mind flashed to the bedroom I shared with my husband, the quiet, predictable routine that left me unfulfilled in ways I didn't often admit. Julian made me feel noticed, desired, alive. Later that day, I found myself remembering our old habits, the way he used to make me feel like I was the only woman in the world, the way our conversations had never been just small talk, the lingering touches that felt innocent at first but carried a history of intimacy. And I realized I had missed him more than I wanted to admit. That evening, at the rehearsal dinner, he was there again, seated across from me at a large round table. Our eyes met over the wine glasses, and for a second, the rest of the room disappeared. The way he smiled at me, the tilt of his head, the soft way he spoke. It was like a magnet I couldn't resist. I caught myself leaning in when he whispered a joke, and my pulse spiked when his hand brushed mine just slightly on the table. I forced myself to look away, reminding myself of my vows, my husband, the life I'd built. And yet, even as I reminded myself, I knew that the danger wasn't gone. Julian's presence was like a slow-burning fire, and I was standing dangerously close to the flame, captivated, knowing I shouldn't be. When the night ended, we walked outside to say our goodbyes, the warm glow of the garden lights around us. He paused, his hands brushing against mine one last time, and I felt the almost forbidden electricity of what could have been. I wanted to lean in, just to see, just to remember. But I didn't. Not yet. I let go, and he let go, and we smiled that knowing, bittersweet smile, the one that said without words that the tension was far from over. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I found myself wandering the hotel lobby, trying to escape my own restless thoughts. And of course, there he was, Julian, leaning against the railing with that same casual confidence that had made me weak in the knees years ago. He looked up, caught my eye, and smirked like he knew exactly what I was thinking. My stomach did that familiar twist, the one that had nothing to do with breakfast. "Can't sleep?" he asked, coming closer. His voice was soft, easy, yet charged in a way that made my pulse race. I wanted to brush it off, to say something polite and distant, but instead I just shrugged. "Just needed some air," I said, my voice tighter than I wanted. We started walking without thinking, side by side, like we were slipping back into a rhythm we hadn't had in years. Julian told stories from his travels, and I found myself laughing more freely than I had in months, maybe years. His attention was focused entirely on me, and it felt dangerous. Every time he glanced at me, every time his hand accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, touched mine, I felt a spark I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Later, during the wedding rehearsal, we were seated next to each other again. I noticed the little things, the way he brushed his hand against mine when passing me a program, the way he leaned in slightly whenever I spoke, as if he wanted to catch every word. I kept telling myself it was harmless. We were just old friends reconnecting. But the tension in the air was undeniable, thick enough to choke on. After rehearsal, the rest of the bridal party went off to prepare for dinner, and Julian and I lingered behind. The empty hall felt charged, almost intimate. He leaned casually against the wall, and I realized just how close we were standing. I could feel the heat radiating off him, the faint scent of his cologne that I'd never forgotten. My heart hammered, my breath caught, and I knew he felt it too. We stared at each other for a moment that seemed to stretch forever, both of us aware of the magnetic pull between us. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered, half to myself, half to him. "Maybe you should," he said softly, his voice low and steady, yet carrying that old charm that made it impossible to resist. The words hung in the air, heavy, electric. I felt my resolve slipping, my body leaning just slightly toward him, craving something I knew I couldn't have. Then, almost cruelly, he stepped back, breaking the tension, and smiled that infuriating, knowing smile. "We'll see each other at the wedding tomorrow," he said, and walked away. And just like that, I was left alone, heart racing, mind spinning, caught between desire and duty. The line between what was safe and what was forbidden had blurred, and I realized that the next day could either break me or save me. The wedding day arrived, and everything felt surreal. The church was packed with friends and family, flowers spilling everywhere, music playing softly, and laughter filling the air. I sat quietly, keeping my eyes forward, trying not to let my thoughts wander to Julian, who was seated a few rows ahead. But it was impossible. Every time he shifted in his seat, I caught a glimpse of him, that familiar tilt of his head, that subtle intensity in his gaze. It felt like he was watching me even from a distance, and my pulse kept jumping in ways I couldn't control. During the ceremony, I found myself thinking about all the moments we had shared long ago, the late-night talks, the stolen kisses, the way it had felt like he could read my mind. I tried to focus on the bride, on the vows being exchanged, but my attention kept drifting. And then, as we were standing for the group photo, I ended up next to him again. Our shoulders brushed lightly, and it was electric. I could feel it in the small of my back, in the warmth of his arm so close to mine. After the ceremony, the reception began, and Julian was constantly nearby, sometimes across the room, sometimes right next to me. We danced briefly, politely at first, our bodies keeping just enough space, but I could feel the tension in every subtle movement. His hand brushed mine on the small of my back, and I felt that old longing stir in a way that scared me. We talked, we laughed, and there were moments when the world around us seemed to disappear, leaving just the two of us in a bubble of memory and desire. Later, the night quieted down, and I found myself outside on the terrace, catching a breath of air. Julian appeared beside me, unexpectedly, leaning on the railing. The moonlight highlighted the lines of his face, the green of his eyes, and I was momentarily frozen. We stood there, side by side, almost touching. "I've missed this," he said quietly, almost too softly to hear. "I know," I admitted, my voice trembling a little. My heart was hammering. I've missed this too." The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to lean in, to let the memories take over, to see if the years apart had only made the pull stronger. Julian's hand hovered near mine, and I felt that all too familiar spark, the heat, the temptation. But then I thought of my life, my husband, the choices I had made, and I stepped back slightly, forcing myself to breathe. Julian gave me a look that said he understood, but also that he had felt it too. That brief, almost intimate connection ended without crossing the line, but it left both of us shaking with the knowledge of what could have happened, and what we had almost allowed ourselves to feel again. We parted that night with a lingering glance, an unspoken promise that this tension wasn't over, but with the understanding that the line between desire and reality had been respected. For now. The day after the wedding, the town felt quieter, almost ordinary again, but I couldn't shake the echoes of the night before. Julian had already left to catch his flight, and the house felt emptier than usual. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring out the window, remembering the way he had looked at me, the way the tension had pulled at both of us, and the way we had stopped just short of crossing the line. It was like a dream I couldn't fully let go of. My husband wandered in, tired from the celebrations, and I realized how numb I had been for so long, how the excitement of attention, of desire, even if forbidden, had reminded me that I was still capable of feeling. I didn't tell him about Julian. I couldn't. The secret pull, the near moments, the electricity between us. It belonged only to me, locked away in the corners of my mind. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about Julian more than I wanted to. His smile, the warmth of his presence, the way he seemed to remember every part of me. It was intoxicating, almost painful. I knew the danger of indulging in those thoughts, yet part of me wanted to call him, to hear his voice again, just for a second. And I realized that sometimes life gives you a taste of something forbidden, something thrilling, just to remind you what it feels like to be alive. I also realized something else. That tension, that near affair, had forced me to confront my own dissatisfaction, my own loneliness, my own needs that had been ignored for too long. And even though nothing had happened, I felt awakened. Wiser, maybe, or at least more aware. Months later, the memory of Julian still lingered, a shadow of possibility that never fully disappeared. We had come close, so close, and yet the line had been respected. And somehow that made it feel even more potent, more real than if we had crossed it. It was a reminder that desire and temptation aren't crimes. They're signs of being human, but choices define who we are. If you've ever had someone from your past walk back into your life and stir up feelings you thought were long gone, you know exactly what I mean. It's thrilling, it's dangerous, and it leaves you thinking about what if for a long time afterward. If this story kept you on the edge, feeling that tension and almost spark of temptation, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more real, gripping stories that explore the complicated side of desire and human connection. You never know when someone from the past might appear and change everything, even if just for a moment.